Hello everyone and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Ads Lyson. If you want 15% off your surfing and outdoor gear, look no further. Go to Northcore on the internet and use the code, capital letters, Grumpy Surf with an extra capital F on the end of surf to receive 15% off your purchase. On the podcast today, I have a captain in the Royal Marines Commandos. His new job role is dealing with how the Royal Marines and military deal with mental health issues and help overcome them. In the show, we talk about mental health pathways, mental health in the military, and for normal everyday people, especially during this COVID period. So please enjoy my conversation with Captain Ryan Morris. Ryan Morris, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm a bit tired, but yeah, good. It's got a few bits going on. I like to plate spin. Sometimes I plate spin a little bit too much, where they wobble more than I'd like them to. But yeah, it's good. It's good. All said and done. Family's well. I'm smiling, so I can't complain too much.
Busy at the moment?
Yeah, mate. I've got other than the three kids, you've got a new role in the Marines, which is great. So they've just created a position which is Royal Marines Mental Health and Resilience Lead, which is amazing. So it's exactly what inspires me to get out of bed professionally. So yeah, there's that. Because it's brand new, it's and obviously innovative in approach. Nothing exists, so you can't beg, borrow and steal from anybody else to start creating anything. It's got to be done from nothing. So, but that's the challenge, and that's good, and it's all basically to help with the wider Royal Marines human performance, which is really exciting. Yeah, there's a lot going on, but it's like a dream job, really.
Do you know whether any of the other armed forces are pushing out mental health stuff like the Marines is at the moment?
Yeah, they are. They are. They're doing it in their own right. I mean, the information that all the services are, the information that all the services are delivering are basically it's the same, but presentationally it's different. So yeah, the Army and the RAF and the Navy are doing their thing, but the Marines are a strange bunch of people. We're weird by nature. That's the reason why we were attracted to this job role. So how we message and the way it's delivered to try and get into a I always say that we recruit abnormal people for an abnormal job. So normality isn't something, normal values isn't something that we can necessarily follow. So we've got to be quite cunning in the way that we do our business, whether it's on operations or even just speaking to the guys. So yeah, that's one of the challenges. But yeah, no, they're pushing out some really good stuff. It's just we've just got a different clientele, as it were.
It must be quite difficult, especially from our background anyway, where we're brought up and the indoctrination we go through recruit training and the people that you work with. It must be quite a difficult challenge to try and get people to open up about certain things, whether it's what's going on at home or what's stressing them out, to create performance from certain people, because the type of people that join are not necessarily the people that are really good at doing that.
Like we're obviously the other end of the age profile in terms of career. Well, you're probably a little bit further on than me, but lads that are joining now, they're different, not in terms of their mentality to achieving operational standards and the commando values and the commando standard, but they are different. They are more they're in a different generation where it's more acceptable. So you believe it or not, the guys and girls that are coming through now are easier to not convince, but to educate. They're more willing and open to accept. It's more the people that are our age end, which are slightly more difficult a challenge, because they see it as, well, I never needed any of that. And that's a fair comment, but what, to put it in a layman's terms, what I try to say to them is, you wouldn't drive a car without training. You're not allowed to cook food in the kitchen or the galley, as we call it, without qualifications. You can't teach PT without being a physical training instructor. The one thing that we never train is our minds. We do train it, but we don't know how. We think we know how, and so it's just the education of that, So we're doing some fantastic stuff. We do build resilience. We do build a great mindset. You know, there's plenty of Marines that go on in their careers to be amazing and fantastic in and out of the service. You know, it's a real pleasure to see the continual production line. But we don't actually train psychological skills, which to me is like, well, if we trained in psychological skills, we'd know the variables, we'd have the education to improve that. So if we know what we're trying to deal with, and we know what we have more education on it, we can pull and maneuver the levers in that education to improve what we're doing rather than doing it by default.
I've got a question for you that is quite controversial, and it's something that I think about quite a lot now that mental health is at the forefront of everybody's mind, whether it's a civilian or in the military. It's pretty much worldwide now, and everybody is on the bandwagon with mental health. Do you think that people play the mental health card as like 10 years ago, people used to play the injured card so they could get out of certain things? And I'm not talking in a military sense as well. I'm talking in a civilian sense where it's really easy to go, I've got something wrong upstairs, or I can't cope because of this, because it's more in the public eye. Do you think that's a more of a prevalent thing, or do you think that you're not really going to see that?
It's a good question. And the fact of the matter is we don't know. We have more exposure to mental health. And I think it's probably worth, just stating there's a misconception behind the term mental health. It includes mental fitness as well, positive mental health. There's a lot of factors surrounding that term. And I often say it's like saying Manchester United and football. They're different. It's Manchester United is a football team, which is part of football, as much as there's medical organisation in football. There's financial implications to football. So mental health is the overarching term. And I think we often confuse mental illness. We use mental health to really refer to mental illness, which is one aspect of mental health. So there's a miseducation there from the outset. The problem is that the reason why people find it so difficult to understand it is because you can't see it. If you don't have a leg, or you've hurt your knee, you're limp or can't walk, and you can visually see something, if you have got something going on, you're suffering from some sort of mental ill health, then you can't see it necessarily. Yeah, there's signs and symptoms, physical signs and symptoms, but you can't see it. And I think I do think there's a difference between it's okay to be anxious, it's okay to be stressed, it's okay to feel a little bit down if something bad happens. All of that is okay. They're normal behaviors which are given right as human beings to feel that emotion without question of a doubt. And I think that it might have got to the point at which where people are taught that stress is a bad thing. And I'm not saying that is the case, but I'm saying that it could be. And all of a sudden, and anxiety is a bad thing, and being depressed is a bad thing. And I think that if we look at the term mental health as a miseducated term, then it sort of, to me, makes sense that if that's been miseducated, then the content surrounding mental illness has been miseducated as well by people that aren't overly educated in it. So the psychiatrists and psychologists and clinical professionals know, but because it's become a popular, on vogue, but really important subject, there's potentially a lot of experts that aren't experts in it that might be and could be miseducating or mis-selling what these terms actually mean. And so when it comes back to, you strip it back to stress as an example, you need stress to perform. The body doesn't realize the difference between good and bad stress, but you need to be stressed. You need to be stimulated on the stress curve. It's optimal performance, and you need to be in there on that stress curve, because otherwise you are lethargic. If you sat around in the house all day, you become lethargic. do people now see that as a mental ill health because they feel down, because they haven't done anything? I've sat around all day, you feel tired because your body needs to be stimulated. Likewise, you go the other side. If you've done too much, you could face burnout over a prolonged period of time. So there is a game to be, or there's a definite mid ground to be had there. And I think that people, what I try to promote is that the fundamental difference in whether there is a problem or not really boils down to one thing, where there's consistent presence. And that is, this is what we've discussed with the clinical professionals in the military and wider, is when consistent presence occurs. If you are feeling lethargic every day, if you are feeling anxious all the time, if you are feeling stressed all the time, when was the last time you can't remember not drinking to excess? When was the last time you can't remember not having an argument at home, if every conversation is a heated conversation? Now, if consistent presence occurs, then you might be looking at something in the realms where you might need to seek professional help. But if it's not, and we all have arguments at home. How many times have you put the key in the front door, opened the door, and you're going to get a bollocking before you've even walked in, because the kids have been drawing up the walls, and you're like, you can just sense the atmosphere. There's no mental ill health there necessarily. It's just life. That's just what happens. But if you were doing that every day, and that was happening for a couple of weeks, that's when you sort of say to yourself, that's not normal. But what we do was like social chameleons. And so we adapt to our surroundings. And when someone, if you were going home and that was happening, if one of your mates came home with you, likelihood they would say, is everything all right? You go, yeah. Because 9 times out of 10, you would have adopted that as your norm value, when actually it's not normal anymore. And so, but it would take someone else to say that to you, to go, how long's that been happening? To which people would reply, I can't remember. So that is you telling yourself that's consistent presence. If it's like, oh no, mate, that's just a one-off, we're usually good, then it's not, and that's just as an example. So I think there is, and so going back to your question, do people play the card? I'm not going to say that they don't. That it's impossible for me to say either way. I think we'd be naive to think that it wouldn't happen, because it can be done. But certainly the people that I've engaged with and the people that I have spoken to over my course and involvement within mental health, I don't believe that to be the case. However, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Let's go right back to the start and work our way up to how you got to the position where you are now. So where did you grow up?
So I was born and bred in Kingston upon Thames, southwest London. And I lived there most of my life. It was interesting. There was four of us, mum and dad. I've got a brother, 2 sisters. Yeah, it was. My early childhood was good. Teenage years was slightly more troublesome. There was, a mixture of hormones and family dynamics that made it that way. But I managed to find a cadets, which was looking back, as a bit of a godsend for me, because it provided the structure that I was probably craving. I joined the cadets at 13, and the Marine Cadets, and I had a fantastic experience, and I still speak to some of the guys now that one of the guys is one of my best mates still now. Yeah, it was a really good experience for me. And I suppose school wasn't something that was ever interested me. I don't know if that's a boy thing generally, like, because boys do mature later than girls, but secondary school for me was a bit of a shit time. I used to get bullied quite a lot. And I look back at that now and I do laugh, because if I could tell myself now, or tell my younger self what I know now, I'd be getting my younger self into jiu-jitsu, that's for sure. But yeah, that's the learning curve, eh? And I didn't really get on too well at secondary school, not because of the school, it's just the people in it. I was never part of any clique, so to speak. I never felt that I belonged to that. I enjoyed myself at cadets more than I did at school, which probably isn't, for the youngsters that may listen to this, that's probably the same, and most kids don't necessarily enjoy school as much as maybe the teachers would like them to. But yeah, I didn't do very well in my GCSEs, like pretty much bombed out of them. So I had to do the retakes because you need to get minimum C grades. You know, thick Morris here. I had to do maths and English again. But I remember I went to a different secondary school. It was an all-girls school, Coombe Girls School, and I was the first intake of boys. So there's 11 boys in a whole girls' school, which was a really, really mad experience because girls are a little bit more touchy-feely than boys. Was it all boys or mixed?
Mixed, yeah.
So mixed. So you wouldn't have had it. You'll understand it. But if you ever go to an all-boys school, personal space is defendable. So if you get in someone's personal space, that's fight language. You know, when you're that age, you just don't do it. It's like, you know, defenses go up, missiles come out, and it's like, get out of my face, you know. Whereas girls, they don't communicate like that. Girls are hand on knee, they're hand on shoulder, they're very tactile. So it's a really strange experience for me going from one school to the other and sitting there thinking, what on earth is going on here? But, you know, what I really liked, there was a couple of teachers, I still speak to one of them now, every now and then, who basically gave me the time of day. And even though I was a bit of a fuck up at sixth form as well, but basically gave me the time of day. And I'll never forget that, where there was belief in my potential, even though that I wasn't showing it at the time. And I remember, I think her name was Miss Wood. She was the maths teacher, and I did a stupid little story, but I remember doing trigonometry, mental subject, and we did the first module that term. I got 100% in it because it's like she was speaking English, yet my previous maths teacher was speaking Chinese to me. It was just crazy. But there was people that believed in me, and so I went on, I did my A-levels, and then one day I remember sitting down at the table, and I was sitting down in my house through no real provocation, and I just jumped up, got on the train and went into London to sign up for the Marines. Yeah, it was, I don't remember why. It was just did it. Just got up and went and signed and went to the careers office at the Strand.
Well, subconsciously, that's already ingrained in you from being at the cadets.
Yeah, I mean, it probably was, but there was a lot of my friends at the time that, I don't know, we had different visions on what we wanted. And so had I stayed around at home, I genuinely believe that I wouldn't have done the things that I've done up to this point. Definitely not. I sort of broke the mold a little bit and put myself out there without even realizing that I was doing that. And it was just a bit of a spur of the moment reaction. At 19, I went, well, I'm just going to go and join the Marines. And I remember coming back home and saying to my mum, oh, by the way, I've just signed up for the Marines. And she was like, what? Like, it was, and that was it really. The rest is history, you know. But it was a bit of a strange, it was like an epiphany. Oh, that'd be a good idea. And off you go, you know.
You must have been at a point where you just kind of sat around. There was not much going on. You didn't really, we talk about life structures. There kind of been that much going on in your life at that point. And you're like, you must have just kind of been sat there. I never had this, but I know some people that have, that just kind of sat there going, what am I going to do now? Because some people aren't travel orientated. They don't want to go and travel around the world, or they haven't been involved in that sort of like group of people that are really, really open-minded, or have had family members or friends that have gone traveling around the world. So if you haven't been exposed to that, then it wouldn't really go through your head. I wanted to, because I was like heavily into surfing even when I was younger. It was one of the things that I really wanted to do. And I was really lucky enough to go to New Zealand and Australia, you know, when I was 16, 17 and be able to go and do those things, but they weren't long periods of time away. And I could imagine just being sat there going, okay, I've done my A-levels, I finished school now. I don't really want to get a normal person job. I'll do that, because you'd already been exposed to being in the Marine Cadets anyway. Yeah,
I mean, I look back now, I know so much more. I know this is going to sound silly because I'm 39, but I know so much more about myself than I did before. And on reflection, I think I'm someone that needs to have a goal and a focus. I can't just, I'm not, and I think everyone's like that to an extent, but I absolutely need to have, there's got to be a vision on direction of where I'm going, because if I don't have that, then I start going a little bit wayward. And there's been a few times that I've gone off piste really. And so I need to have that. And I didn't realize that at the time. And I think that was probably the driver, where I was so involved in the Marine Cadets. Like I remember at 18, at 52 weekends, I was away like 47 of them. I was just, and that was coming to, like, my A-levels was coming to an end, and I was like, oh, what next? I don't know what next. And I needed to have something. And I just thought, well, yeah, the Marines seems like a good idea, probably because of cadets, probably because I needed a direction, but I didn't really realise. I knew it'd be really hard, but I just thought, yeah, let's just do that. It wasn't like a be all end all. I've got to do that or else. It was just, that seems to make sense. The maths, the logic makes sense to, you put those variables together. That seems like the logical choice. But I didn't know it at the time. It was more of an impulsive reaction. But yeah, on reflection, that seems to be the way that came about.
Did your kids at school know that you were going to Marine Cadets, or did you kind of keep that a little bit closer to your chest?
Yeah. So they some of them did, some of them did, but it was like, the sort of thing that you could get beaten up for, and bullied for. And I was already bullied anyway, quite a lot at school. So I kept myself to myself. A few friends knew, but it wasn't something that you sort of swung from the rooftops and shouted about.
Yeah, because I went to Scouts. I did Beavers, I did Cubs. I didn't go, what was the one above Scouts? It was, I can't remember. It's some sort of like adventure leader or something like that. Never told anyone really that I did it. It was just kind of like, I think it was a Sunday club maybe that I went to a few scout camps through my younger days. Never really had any involvement with the cadets or anything like that. I just thought it was a little bit more hardcore. I never got pushed into anything, so I just kind of did. My parents just let me do things on my own, which was pretty cool, and experience things. So, I was never pushed into, like, for instance, I wanted to go and do karate. So my mum took me down to the YMCA and she goes, there you go, off you go. I did a few sessions of that and was like, nah, I'm not Bruce Lee. So fuck that. Let's go and do something else. I just bounced in and out of things like that. But I pretty much stayed doing that because I liked the outdoors, and I liked tying knots and making stuff and chopping up wood and making fires, and all things that, in my opinion, little boys should be involved in. Yes, the academic side is brilliant, whether you're good at maths, physics, chemistry and all that sort of thing. But I also think that society or people should have good core skills. And the way I see it, and you're going to laugh at this, is if there's a zombie apocalypse, I'm not going to be the one that dies first, and I can look after the people that are close to me. That's the way I see it.
I mean, that is it's an extreme, but it's a valid point. Yeah, if we do get attacked by zombies, you're going to survive, eh?
Everyone around where I live is going to die. I've already got a plan of how I'm going to make my house into a fortress.
Jesus.
Let's talk a little bit about recruit training. We won't go all the way through, but how did you find that whole experience?
It was tough. Like it was really tough. It was something that, it was everything I thought it was going to be and more, in a good way and bad way. So the difficulty level I thought would be, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. It was probably more like 15, 20 out of 10. It was, but everything that it's upon reflection, everything that I was seeking, the structure, the common goal, the purpose, which allowed me to have drive and develop determination and courage and cheerfulness in the face of adversity. It was everything that was me. And that's what I go back to. Like, we recruit abnormal people for an abnormal job, and there is no social, cultural cut of person that makes a Marine. They come from all walks of life, from every background. It's more to do with the grey matter upstairs as opposed to whether you went to the Caribbean on holiday or whether you went to Skegness on holiday. It really doesn't matter. It make no difference. It doesn't matter what church you went to. It doesn't. It really doesn't make any difference. So for my grey matter, that was important. I mean, I remember, there was a time where I was going to opt out of training, and I think it was about week 13 where, because I had a lady back home, and it's a really tough gig for the girls, And you got the friends saying, "Oh, well, he's never here. What? He's not even because it's all young as well." And I remember walking to the office to knock the door to say, "Oh yeah, that's me. I don't want to do it." And literally, as I got to the door, I walked round past the door to the notice board, started reading orders, and then walked back to my room. I just couldn't do it. And that was at that point, I then made peace with the fact that you just got to grizz this out now, and not looking for a way out. And I think up to that point, I was probably, well, let's see how it goes, because if it does get a little bit harder, then I've always got that to use as an excuse. But that was never really was enough, because I knew deep down something, there was like a stoppage lever that, you'll go no further than this, as in you can't opt out, because that's not what you do. And fortunately I swerved the door and didn't have that awkward conversation, and fortunately didn't leave, because it would have definitely have made my life journey go in a different direction. But yeah, I liked it. It was, I remember at the end of training, I sat on my bed at home with my green beret in my hand, and I looked at it and I went, all right, and I chucked it in the box and then went, oh, what's next? And you don't realise that the type of person that you are when you've done something like 32 weeks of commando training, it's the hardest basic training in the Western world for other than SF. And you don't realise what you've achieved. You just sort of yeah, see you later. And that's kind of why I love the blokes, because they're humble people generally, and it's really nice to just be around greatness, but it's not in your face. And yeah, it was so training was good. I look back on it with fond memories, but the experience wasn't necessarily what the thought that I have now on it.
From the point of us being in training, 20 years ago to what it is now, it has changed for the better. I think there's no more screaming at you, being told that you're shit and you're never going to pass anything. And I had a lot of that. But
you had a lot of that. I didn't have a lot of that.
No, I had a lot of that, but I'm still here now. So yeah, I think that's where you get that camaraderie, isn't it? Where you've got people that have got the same mental fortitude as you, whether they were in 50 years ago during the Second World War, going to Ratnakari and being trained to be a commando at that time. Okay, training has evolved, but the mental fortitude and the mental robustness of people going through that sort of harshness is what creates a more versatile person. But I also think that, and this isn't stereotyping, the person that joins the Royal Marines and passes out at the other end, and don't get me wrong, I haven't been in the army, I haven't been in the RAF or anything like that, but from personal experience and meeting certain other individuals, people that are in the Royal Marines are a little bit more intellectual. They can be left alone and be told to do something.
The recruiting standards are different. They are different, but that's because there's a different output to have, and the training is different as well. There's more in commando training. There's more autonomy, because that's what the role performance standard. What do you want a Marine to look like? Well, what's the end state look like? Well, they want a more autonomous Marine, a bit more a free thinker. So that's what training is designed to do. It is to do that. But I think it's an interesting point that you raised about the generational training standards. Because we're now 20 years in. Guys that were 40 years ago will go, "Oh, training's easier, this, that, and the other." Well, fine well, having been a PTI, physical training instructor yourself, that there was nothing I loved more than I relished in the fact that I could cause psychological pain and destruction to those guys in training on the bottom field, because it was driving them towards their goal. Not because necessarily, I was probably a little bit sadistic at times, depending on my mood swings and what the troop had done to either improve that or make it worse. But the test standards have remained the same. How we've gone about doing our business is completely different. And I think that's clever from the Marines, because society is not the same as it was 40 years ago, not 20 years ago, not 5 years ago. It's a different clientele you've got to try and recruit from to achieve the same goal that it's always been. So you have to adapt, and you have to change the way that you do your business, because if you don't, the Marines doesn't exist. So we've managed, and I think there's credit to the Corps to be able to adapt the way it's adapted, but yet still keep the same output. No test standards have changed. The end state is still the same. Final X is still, the same, other than location and numbers that might be in the troop, the exercising troops. But the way you get to that has got to have changed, because it's a different type of person that's joining. It's not better or worse. It's just different. They're more educated now. I think you got the intellect levels much better than it ever has been. The flexibility in thought is much better than it's ever been. That causes a problem in training, because initially it's about direct, you do as I say. But we're learning as well, and we can't. The day that we say that we're amazing at what we do is the day that we fail, and so we've always got to constantly strive to seek professional greatness. And if you don't strive to, and if you think that you are great, then that's the downward spiral. So, I take credit. I think there's credit where credit's due for the senior Royal Marine Command about how they've gone about their business to be flexible and adapt to make sure that operational output is delivered, for UK defence. So I think it's a really interesting, but it's an interesting subject, because there'll be people listening to this going, "No, I disagree," but that's fine. But we're current in this at the moment, and I think that it's in a safe pair of hands as we sit here now.
The problem with this and this sort of conversation and a lot of conversations similar to this, you only have to look at a few Facebook posts, is that people have got their own opinion. They will always have their own opinion. It just depends on whether they want to turn around and go, well, actually, it's probably wrong in the way that my thinking process is. Because people are quite passionate about it, especially with the developmental cycles of how you create a soldier through training. And they've served themselves. They've all got their own opinions on what you should do to create that. It's just a massive hole that just gets wider and deeper. And there are so many variables that are involved with it that sometimes you just kind of have to go, do you know what? Okay, I've put my thought processes and my opinions across. Let's just move on with it. You can't.
Do you know what though? It's really interesting, because the difference of opinion is underpinned by one thing, that everyone cares. And even if it's a negative opinion, the fact that they're saying something, they just care about what they loved and what they still love, that brand, that ethos, that culture, that core. And so that's why passions run high in quite divisive decisions, like women in ground close combat. Women are now allowed to join the Royal Marines, and that was a really divisive making process. That when you understand why, then the majority of people, when they understand why that decision was made, they then don't turn around and go and make those flash brash comments saying it's not the same as in my day, blah blah blah, because they understand the education, but they don't, because unfortunately they're not privy to the reasons why. And on that, and I've got two girls, and I was on the side of, I'm not sure it's going to work. And I think that was because institutionally I've been in a male-dominated environment. And you'll agree, you've got a daughter as well, in the fact that if your daughter came home and said to your dad, I really want to do that, but they won't let me do it because I'm a female. And you're like, what? Why not? Because you want your opportunities for your daughter, much as I do and everyone else does, to be maximised and not discriminated against by the fact that they're female. And so when you're looking at if my girl said that to me, I go, right, let's see about that then. And you'd fight for that equality of opportunity. I'm not interested in equality of outcome. I don't think we should be changing the test standards to accommodate, because that will affect operational output. But if my girls should have the opportunity to join the Royal Marines when they're older, absolutely. If they are good enough, they will pass the test to pass out at the end. what I absolutely know is that, and my 8-year-old's already said it to me. She said, and we talk about this sort of stuff at home because I wanted to be alive to the fact that, you know, things are changing. It's amazing. The shift in the way that like women's sports being portrayed now, and you know, it's awesome. And I remember, I have women's sport on all the time on the TV. I'm just a bit of a sport fiend anyway, but I want my girls to know that that's okay. Because when Imogen was young, she watched some boys playing football. I said, "Oh, would you like to play football?" She said, "No, that's for boys only." And I'm like, No, it's not for boys only. I said, "You know that the women's football team got to semi-finals of the World Cup. The England cricket team are world champions. You know, like the women are really, really good. The rugby team, I think, were they runners up to New Zealand in the last Rugby World Cup. You know, Six Nations champions for the last 3 years. You know, they're doing fantastically well, and I want them to know that that's okay, that they're not hindered by that, and so they have the equality of opportunity to be able to do what they want. And so yeah, it's but going back to this, it was a divisive decision that split opinion completely, and I was like, you've got to move with the times, and absolutely equality of opportunity is what we need to strive for, because you see it in other organisations where I think would be stronger whereby women were in the Marines, because what they would bring is a difference to how to achieve the same goal. And we need to be flexible, especially in the space of future commando forces that we're working, because we just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And so you want to have as many tools in your toolbox and weapons that you can bring to bear. And the more diversity that you have in that respect, I think is a good thing, providing that the commando standards achieved. So it's an interesting topic. But
yeah, that's my opinion as well. As long as they can do it, let them do it. Let's talk a little bit about your career then. So you passed out of training. Where did you go from there?
I was quite lucky. I passed out on the Friday, and on the I think the Tuesday I joined 4-2 Commando down in Plymouth. On the Wednesday I was a flight out to Northern Ireland, straight out on Op Banner, which was amazing. So I did three months out there. The final part of that tour, came back. The unit re-rolled into a different organisation, like a formation. Don't know if you remember Commando 21. And then in the February, we re-rolled, and then we went to Iraq, invasion of Iraq in 2003. Off you go. And that was strange. It's really strange. I mean, I remember it quite vividly. We were in the US helicopters, CH-57s, I believe, were the bigger ones, the Sea Stallions with the 7 rotors, the big troop carriers, and the 46 was like the CH-46, like the smaller Chinook type helicopters. And we were in the 57s, and we were the second wave of 4-2. And I remember, like, I was shitting myself, like, genuinely, because we had 40, like, what actually happened was not necessarily what we were getting told. Like, you know, there's a hysteria about an invasion and about going across into a war zone and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, when you realise that the Iraqi defence force that they had down in the Al-4 was just a couple of old guys, really, you know, they didn't stand a chance. The Republican Guard were defending the key areas and stuff, you know, but you didn't know that. And the first wave had left, and we were sat down, and the ramp went up at the back, and I remember feeling the blades lift up, and you're like, right, this is it. Like, you know, the war movies start coming into your mind. You're like 19 years old, you're like 20 years old, you don't know what's going on, you've never done this before. And I'm thinking, and then the dust was going around outside, and I'm thinking, oh my God, like, this is it. Like, you're thinking of all the worst case scenarios, and like, you're looking at lads and they're smiling, but in their eyes they're not, you know, and it's all that really, really surreal. And then the next thing you know, the aircraft then started to relax, and the blades dropped down, and we like straight away confusion, going, what's going on here? And we were told to get off. I'm thinking that's not what the pre-drills were. And then we found out that one of the helicopters that had, in the first wave, it exploded, had electrical malfunction, and exploded in the air. And I think there was 11, 12 Marines that died. And so that first wave about turned, and the reason why it did was because the guys on that were pivotal to 4-2's insertion into the L4, and they came back, and it was I can't describe it really. It's a really surreal. I didn't know any of the guys on that helicopter. I was like the newbie, the sprog, so I didn't really know anyone other than the guys that you work with directly. And I remember the Padre, he was doing the rest of their troop, and anyone else that knew those was doing a service on the landing zone, or on the HLS, sorry. And it was just weird. It was so weird, because that is not like 1 minute you're at max chat, stimulated, going, I could die here, right, what's going on? Is my weapon good? My kit's all squared, looking at the rest of the guys, and the next minute there's a service going on because there's someone that's died, or there was people that died in the explosion. And it was just, I don't know, and that went on all night, and no one knew what was going on. And then you heard 40 Commando were there was casualties and all sorts, and it was like, wow. And then I just remember, the American, like, no one wanted to fly with the American aircraft, not because the aircraft pilots weren't any good. It's the aircraft are old. They're just old, and they've got a good enough record, or they had a good enough record to fly, but I don't know, the lads lost confidence in them. No one wanted to get in one of those helicopters. As you can imagine, well, is mine going to explode then? You go to war, you die by the enemy. That's what it's about. Not die by a friendly force's mechanical failure. That's not the way out, in that particular situation. And I remember it was like sunrise, and the American helicopters flew off. We're like, no one knows what was going on. And the next thing, you just hear that distinctive sound, and your spine only people in the military would understand this. They're like bit freaky, but that distinctive sound of the rotors over the horizon. And I think there was 8 RAF Chinooks that came over, and the lads was like, you could see the elation to say, that's the taxi in. And like in the American airframes, you can operate the ramp, you can touch stuff, this, that, and the other. As you all know, in a British military helicopter, you don't touch anything other than your seatbelt. That's it. You don't touch the ramp, you don't touch the gun, the machine guns out the side. That's the aircrew do that. And I just remember the ramp dropping. We were in our sticks, ready to line up, ready to go. And I remember the ramp dropping, and you've just got the aircrew just stood there, like, it was hands behind, and he just pointed direct, boom, in, waved us in, one stick at, whereas the Americans would just get on. And it was just, and the feeling in the morning of going in and those was different to the night before. It was more about, right, let's do this. Like, we're ready. And it was just, it was such a different emotion. Same thought process as to what was going on when you landed, but just a different emotion. I mean, these guys were unbelievable. They, like, where we landed, I remember one of the helicopters, because they had the machine gun troop in, an anti-tank troop, sorry. The kit they were carrying, I mean, is like 160 pounds, something stupid like that. And then their weapons, it was like ridiculous, because they had to man-pack, like, carry everything. And the helo, basically, there was a thin road, and it just turned, dropped its ass and opened the ramp so the lads could walk on hard standing rather than it was just, I mean, you're talking about like world class there, and you don't realise you're involved in being around world class, And it turned out that it wasn't what we thought it was. Like the Spectre gunships the night before had just levelled everything. 40 had a bit of a fracard. That was that, and there was a few contacts on that tour, but yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, and we got a shed load of leave after that as well. I mean, we had 10 weeks in total, and then we just went around the world on our leave, traveling, just went on holidays and spent all the money that we saved and probably a bit more. But
yeah, I think I had 4 months off, maybe.
Yeah,
I was with 4-5
yeah.
Commando, yeah. And when we got back, I remember I had to spend a night because it was an 8-hour drive back home, and I was like, we got back and they're like, right, fin out. Literally, I think we were back for about 5 hours. See you later, lads. We'll see you after Christmas. And this was like, I can't remember when it was when we got back. It must have been, was it October? No, because Telek was the beginning of the year, wasn't it? I just remember getting back and I was like, just had so much time off, and I was like, right, okay. So I went to the, that's when the internet was first started to dial up, and I went down and I booked a flight to Indonesia, and I spent 4 months there, which was pretty cool. But yeah, what did you do after Telek?
I mean, I played around with a few things. I mean, we went to Norway and America the following year, and then I promoted to corporal fairly quickly, actually. I mean, it was within 3 years of passing out. So I either brown-nosed someone and they liked it, or I was doing a good job. So, but yeah, I ended up on a corporal's course in fairly short order, and it wasn't. I don't know. I ended up in Northwood, so North London, and that's where I met Baz O'Connell, who was the Royal Marine PTI there, and just got on really well with him. We were doing the security there, and I ended up doing amateur boxing, and he got me involved. And he was a real sort of dynamo, real energetic individual that would help anybody, would put himself out to make stuff happen, and just I never tell him this, so hopefully he never listens to this. But he was a real inspiration in the go getting. Like he helped me kick on again, in where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I remember him saying to me, he goes, "Oh, do you want to do a PT course?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not, no chance." I said, I couldn't think of anything worse to do than that. Why would I want to go and do the phys, the exercise on that course is horrific. There's no way that I want to do that. Why? And he said to me these words. He said, "Are you scared?" And I went, "No, sign me up." I mean, I can't believe that I fell for it. And that's basically how it came to be. And I went on PT aptitude. And I think if you spoke to Dave Hartley, who was the course instructor, I probably scraped the aptitude, but I passed it. And the rest is history, as it were. Where went on the PT2's course. And when you talk about defining people that have real influence on your life, Baz was one of them, and he didn't realise it. And Dave Hartley was another. And he's a course instructor, and not because he was a course instructor. It was, I've already mentioned my teacher at school, a guy called Richard Jones, who believed in you, And Baz, I don't know whether he believed in me, but he just wanted to help me, and there was no gain from it. And Dave was, I remember on the course, the first 3 weeks before summer leave it was, and I just thought, and it was like in training, I just thought, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I just don't know whether this is possible. Like, and my performance was pretty poor. And I remember going back on summer leave, and I spoke to Erin, and she said, "What have you got to lose? What is it? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know." And it was like, I've always suffered from the little man on my shoulder whispering in my ear, going, "You're not good enough. You'll never be able to do this." And I've always suffered from it. And it was the, like you get the people that say that don't bother, they don't really try bothering to do something, because they say, well, if they're like, well, if I fail, then it didn't matter because I didn't put any effort in. And that's how I lived my first part of my career. I'm not going to bother trying. And then if I pass, I can say, well, I didn't even bother trying, and I passed it. But really, it was being scared of failure. And I can't believe how much everything that I've done in my life to this date had been handcuffed and restrained by 26 years of being scared of failure. And you can imagine, and what I try and teach my kids now is failure's okay. It's you need it to be successful. Don't worry about it. It's the process. And I was definitely a fixed mindset person, rather than growth, and try and promote that in the kids, because I just think to myself, imagine if you had 26 years of not being scared of failing, as well as it. Where would you be now? Like what would you be doing? And And I remember coming back off summer leave, and like the camp circuits, there's 800 meter lamp. Well, they say it's 800 meter lap of the camp, like the road, the ring road. And I'd be like last. And after summer leave, literally just through a mindset change, I was second. Well, I was first to the camp circuit, and Chris Steer would always run past me saying, what he used to say to me, he said something like, too fast, because I'd like nail it to the guard room. And then he had a set of legs on him, Chris, so he was coming first. But I came second, out of 11 instead of last. And that was nothing more to do with the mindset. And I'm like, what? This is odd. And I suppose that started sowing the seeds in terms of like that sort of development. And going back to Dave, like he said to me, remembers when we did our circuit training exam, our test, and I'd set my circuit up, and I'm a bit of a miserable looking bloke, 6'5", don't smile a lot, but I do have a party on the inside. And I remember I'd played, I can't remember the song actually, but it was like a lively song beforehand. So like if I'm doing any PT now, I'll like play Bruno Mars, Uptown Funk, just to get me in the mood, because I need to sort of snap out of the miserable personality. And I remember him saying to me before the circuit train, he says, right, quartermaster, are you ready? And I said, well, if I'm not, I'll fail. And I never said, and that wasn't to be arrogant. That was because it was the first time in my life where I'd not been scared of failing, and I just was going to give it everything. And it was really liberating. And I did this thing, and like every now and then you will look over at the DS, the directing staff, to see what they're doing, and it was like non-emotional as always, but you're involved. And I remember it, like that hour just went, and we sat in the debrief, and I think I got like 95%. It was unbelievable. And I just remember sitting there just thinking to myself, wow, that was the first time I'd literally not been scared of failing anything, as silly as that sounds. And look at what you've just done. And they said the feedback was like really, really good. And I'm thinking, well, I need more of this. And that's how it sort of like evolved. And do I still get scared of failing things? Absolutely. But I think I've got a better mindset to go, you just got to keep going. You just got to keep persevering with that. And Dave was someone that, he said to me at the end of the course, like I came top student on that course, and he said to me, the first 2 weeks, I didn't even know if you were going to get to the first physical test marker at week 6. But he believed in me and was able to basically create the conditions for me to grow as a person. And that's all it is. And he doesn't realise, again, that he's done that. And I don't think you do when you have interactions with people. And I'm like, I don't forget stuff like that, clearly, as I've just said, but that's what I want to do to other people. But I want to actively be in the moment to do it as well, not just do it because that's just what happens when you do it. It's just we always, if anything ever goes wrong, we always have a massive inquest where there's always a big investigation, why, what, who was to blame. But if anything ever goes really, really well, we never investigate that, why it went well. What was the equation? What was the variables as to why did that happen? Why was it so magical? How did that moment be created? How can it be recreated? We always look at how can we avoid a situation from happening again, but never look at how we can recreate a situation that was fantastic or magnificent. What was the variables in there that we can try and put in place for next time to get a better outcome than just it being good because it was? And that was something that, that's where, as I'm moving into now, is where that's what I want to, where I suppose the investment in people is where my passion came from, because that happened to me, and I felt the benefit of it. And so that's just trying to do it for other people, and in the mental health and resilience space, in the human performance, it's just trying to make people better tomorrow than today. It's like, yeah.
We're kind of moving on to the latter end of what we were going to be talking about, mental health, but just talk a little bit about your involvement with being an exercise rehabilitation instructor, and also how that evolved into become involved with people with disabilities. You involved quite heavily with the Invictus Games as well, weren't you?
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, as I've said, my confidence in my own ability has always been something that I've had to fight with. And I've always been able, always outwardly perceived. But it's something that I've always had to fight hard against. And I remember I was going to leave the service. I had my notice in to leave in 2009 or whenever it was. And I realised I was making a big mistake. And Baz Colarusso and Bo Beauchamp, who was a chief and the PT advisor at the time. I was like 2 months away from leaving, and I said I don't want to leave. And at the time, you couldn't rescind your notice to leave; you had to go. And I remember both of them fought the Navy Manning for me to stay. And I remember speaking to Bo, who was incredible in that decision making process. And he said to me, well, he said, right, we've managed to get you're done. You're staying in the Marines. It's you're good to go. And I said, oh, thanks very much. And he says, anything else? And I went, well, yeah. You don't ask, you don't get, but it's the only chance I could get on a rehab instructor's course, and there was a big waiting list for that at the time. And he just looked at me and smiled. He said, I see what I can do. And I think part of the reason why that was because the year I had my notice in to leave, I didn't give up. I carried on operating at that same level, and they respected that. So little did I know that would pay back in my favour. So I ended up going on the course by default, really, because it was just can I get on that course? And I was on the next one, and that was it, really. And I remember finishing the 6 months at Headley Court at the time, and I remember finishing the course. I came back to Lympstone. I only did 3 months at Lympstone because I was selected for promotion. So the year that I was due to leave the Marines, that report that I got was I went to promotion board, and I was selected for promotion to sergeant. So I did a really short time downstairs in the rehab instructors department. And then I was on a seniors course. And when I did the seniors course, that's when I went to Hasler. And I suppose that's where part 2 of my career really started, because, in that time I'd been to Afghan as well. And there was all the frontline war fighting, the stuff you join the Marines for. And I went to Hasler again by default because Bo said to me, right, you're going to go to 40 Commando as a unit RI, the rehab instructor, but I need you to go to Hasler for 4 months because that needs to be filled, and then there's space. And I said, yeah, no problem. I didn't really know what Hasler was, and Hasler was is a place for the most severe wounded, injured, and sick service personnel that the Marines had at the time.
Well, it was created, wasn't it, out the tail end of what I was on Herrick 5. So when we started getting a lot of casualties,
the complex trauma back from Afghan, and that was created off the back of a fag packet. People having the vision and the drive to go, we need to do something more here, and that's how it was created. And you're around greatness all the time, but you just, because it's normal to you, don't realise it. But yeah, so they created this organisation where it was Marines looking after Marines, and it was great, because they understand our sort of odd culture. So yeah, so I went there for 4 months, and I said, yeah, no problem. It'd be great, small little windows, only up the road really, and then I go to 40 Commando, which is what I wanted. And that's where it started really. And I was lucky enough where I was sort of like voluntold to go to San Diego, which was a real chore, and and it was for a 2-week Wounded Indian Sick service. So Wounded Warrior Games is the military's version of the Invictus, and they would do trials. Each service would do trials where the US Marines would invite other nations to their trials, and the UK was one of them. And so that was the invite. We went out there for 2 weeks with about 14 Marines, and one of those guys was a guy called Phil Eaglesham, who is now my best mate. He contracted Q fever on Herrick 12 and is now in a wheelchair. Incredible guy, but he will come up in a later dip. But yeah, so, and that's where it was. And I remember coming back, the bit where it was an eye opening. There was a guy called Rosie. He was in an explosion on a US familiarization patrol. So it was at the end of their tour. The US were going to roll in, and they obviously send the advance parties out to get ground familiarization done, as you're well aware. And Rosie was there, and the US Marine was next to him. They took a knee, and there was an explosion, and the US Marine died. He'd only been out there 2 or 3 weeks, and that protected Rosie enough where he survived, but he lost the sight in his left eye and the use of his left hand properly. Anyway, he was out on that trip, and I said, "Oh, has anyone seen Rosie? We've got to transfer to the airport. We've got to go." And I said, "Oh, I'll go and find him." I knocked on his door in his hotel room, and I said, "Oh, mate, is everything all right?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, he's got to go." He goes, "Oh, mate, I'm just packing my bag." I said, "All right, cool." And I watched him walk over to his bag. He straddled his bag, sat on it, squeezed it with his knees, and tried to do this bag that was toppers because he bought loads of stuff for his kids with one hand. And it was at that moment I went, I get it. I get it now. It wasn't, the involvement with these lads wasn't about the glitz and glamour. It wasn't about, I mean, it was great that they could go and do athletics or they could go and cycle and they can compete as an equal. But the stuff that really got to these guys, really truly got to these guys, was that Rosie couldn't hold a nail and a hammer to bang into a wall to put a picture of his kids up. That's the stuff that really got him. That's the level of disability that we're talking about. It wasn't the stuff where you can go, look at how well these guys are doing, and they do incredible things. It's the stuff at home where the interaction with their children, the day-to-day stuff that, like packing a bag, that they find difficult. And I'm like, right, there's more than meets the eye here. And that's where my love for helping people came. And I suppose off the context of what I've already said, where people invested in me, I suppose it was natural for me to try and invest into someone else to help them. And it was meaningful, it was purposeful, and it was something that was important to me. And so, yeah, I mean, that led, one thing led to another, and we ended up, through chance meeting, we set up a race ourselves. It was the Rehab Triathlon, a swim, bike and a row. We invited the US over. We had Prince Harry. Harry came to camp in 2014. That sort of grew arms and legs. And from that, I met a lady called Jane Kavanagh. She's an incredible person who was involved with Help for Heroes and British Paralympics. And she created a program called the Frontline Start Line program. And it was aimed at getting military people into elite sport, into the Paralympic program. Because you take the psyche of a military person, the drive, determination, discipline, and you put them in an environment where they can flourish and support that. You get the result like Dave Henson, who won a bronze medal at the 2016 200 meters Paralympic Games. That's the result. And so it was not a fast track, but you're using those variables that is needed in an athlete anyway. Anyway, I met up with her, and through that relationship development, she's incredible. She ended up landing the chef de mission role for Invictus Games in Toronto and Sydney. And I'd already worked with her in London anyway, and the London Games, just through my involvement. And she called me and said, look, I want to ask you something. I said, yeah, what's up? She said, I want you to be the chef de mission for sport. So basically being my senior management team. She said, what do you think? I said, I'm there every day of the week, like 100%. And so, yeah, managed to land myself that experience and exposure out in Toronto and Sydney, which is incredible. You're at the sort of the bayonet end of military sport and endeavour, as it were. It was something else. I mean, I remember being trackside, and there's a guy, Steve Seburn, love, like him and Claire, amazing people, amazing. And I remember we come out of the hotel, and there was two guys. There was Ian and Steve was stood there, and I'm like, why hadn't they got on the bus? This is in Toronto, I think it was. Why aren't they on the bus? The athletics bus left an hour ago, sort of thing. Well, these two numpties, I don't know what they were doing, doing their hair or something like that. And I didn't know these lads. I went, lads, where are you supposed to be? Athletics. I'm like, right, well, this is my remit. I need to get these boys here. So Jaguar Land Rover were the title sponsors. So I, the challenge coins you can get. I went up to the guys, sorting them out, and they're for VIPs. Well, as far as I was concerned, the athletes are the VIPs. Everyone else is there for them. So I basically managed to work a deal. And I said, right, lads, I've sorted the transport out. Don't worry. And this 2018 plate, because that was the year it was in, brand new Jaguar turned up. And these lads are looking at me going, who's this guy? I said, right, jump in, boys. And I'm chatting away. And what's your story then, lads? Well, Ian basically, didn't leave the house for, I think it was like 2 or 3 years through PTSD. And Steve, I can't remember what, I think there was, I can't remember what was the issue with him, but he was basically, Claire had a phone call saying, get your coat, get the kids, come and say goodbye. He's done, from the hospital by all intents and purposes, 18 months before. So get to trackside, anyway, chatting away with him, get to trackside, and 1500 meters comes up, and these two numpties are in that race. And I'm looking over, I'm looking at, looking over, and I'm seeing his kids. Steve's kids are there, draped in a Union Jack, watching their dad about to run 1500 meters for his country, because that's what it was representing. And they were sobbing their eyes out. They're sobbing their hearts out because they should have said goodbye to him 18 months ago. His dad's just about to run 1500 meters in a race, compete. Like, that was me. I was bawling my eyes out as well. I couldn't hold it back. I was like, the level of value that you add to these people, like, I just couldn't get away from it. And that ended up being my downfall in the end. But yeah, it was, and then you watch Ian, who was jumping up and down at the end in front of like 2,000 people. The guy didn't leave the house to go and get milk, 8 months before. And he's jumping up and down, like, they didn't win, but they won in life. And they, everyone's cheering everyone on, and like, I don't just think like the power of the sport and creating the conditions to grow, basically. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. And I actually suffered like myself, because the next day I was at swimming training. I was sat there. Talk about lows. I want to be involved in the field of play again. I want to be involved in that. I get back to CLR, the logistics regiment, as the transport officer, like the following week, and I'm sat there, and one of the lads went, "Boss, don't you think you're really here, are you?" And I'm like, "What? Sorry? What'd you say?" Because it's just like, yeah, it was an amazing experience. Really good chapter in my life.
So how did that develop into what you're doing now? So you've got your new role that you're just starting at the Commando Training Centre, but you've also started a podcast up yourself, haven't you, that you're currently doing the interviews for, called Cant, Can, Will?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's right. So I suppose my journey has been a life of, I suppose there's failure, there's been lack of confidence, there's expert for experience. Not that I chose it that way. But the mental health really was important to me because, a couple of years ago, I had a breakdown at work, like full on breakdown. And I didn't even see it coming. And that was the one thing there that I'm like, right, consider myself a bit of a roughy tufty Royal Marine, and I've achieved great things, as people would say. But I didn't see it that way, but that's what people would say. And I had a full on breakdown in the office. Like, I started crying, and I didn't know why. I couldn't stop. And I remember going to see a psychologist, and it was amazing. It was hard, really hard, but it was amazing because imagine if you're navigating somewhere and someone says, "Oh, do you know where you are?" And you go, "Yeah, well, show me on the map then." And you're looking at the map and going, "Yeah, I'm here." And you sort of circling your finger on where you are, and they go, "Well, show me exactly where you are." And they keep pressing because they know you don't know. That's what she was doing to me, basically, in a obviously a good way. And I went, I don't know where I am actually. And what they did was they managed to look back. We looked back at where I'd come from, realised where I was, and then I was able to change the direction where I needed to go. And it was incredible. And it's like and for me it was like a map reading, which is where the symbol for Cant, Can, Will comes from. It's 3 directional arrows. Your directional arrow is the centre point. And if you start veering off left and right, then we'll pick you back up and push you forward on your centre point, or organisation centre point, or wherever it might be. And so, and through like the investment of other people invested in me, that's where it sort of came to be. And the role creation that I'm in now, where the lead for Royal Marines Mental Health and Resilience, off the back of 8-9 years of trying to trying to instigate a culture change into Royal Marines, not to make them weaker, but to make them stronger. Because if you can be proactive in any injury or illness, you'll get longevity, and you'll get a better return for your investment. and that's not been without problem. It's really through like inspiration from yourself, really, like where I called you last year and said about the podcast. So I'm thinking, all right, Ads is doing that. Is he? Right, yeah, okay. I want to do one myself. And the reason why I want to do one myself is because there are millions and millions and millions of people out there that are amazing. Millions of people are amazing that can either educate or inspire through their story or expertise to help people be better tomorrow than today. And I want to tell those stories. And I've had some really diverse individuals already that haven't released it yet. It's going to be out in a few weeks, but some really diverse individuals that will talk about life stuff. So we're talking about like grief, but how could you still be successful through following the loss of someone close to you, as an example? And if someone listens to that and takes inspiration from it, and you say, do you know what, I need to move on from my current state. You never get over grief. You never goes, but you need to move on with your life. And if speaking to individuals in those areas will help, then that's the aim. And if it helps one person, then it's worth the time and effort going into it. So that's kind of like where it's the sort of origins and where I want to go with it.
Yeah, definitely having a platform like this to speak to people like yourself, and the podcast, the platform that I have, surfing, military stories, a little bit of grappling, martial arts, it all kind of ties in together, and it's all about relating and having that commonality of people's experiences, whether they're a high profile person, the top of their game, or they're really, really popular, whether it's a top performing sports star or it's just your normal average person. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We've all had different experiences. And when people are telling those stories and they can relate to it, and they might have a little bit of information there that might help that person, I think that's quite important. So whether it's your podcast or you speak to somebody else and they're doing something different and they can relate to that, and then they have a direction to go, if they have, let's say, what we're talking about here, mental illness or PTSD, or they've got an injury and they've got somewhere to go where they can actually have some feedback and be able to go, do you know what? Other people are going through this experience as well. And they might be able to, we're in a day and age now with social media where you can get in contact with your sport hero if you wanted to. All you got to do is send them a message on Instagram. They might reply to you, they might not. That's completely up to them.
And that's the driver for it. And the words can't, can, will, I kind of made it up on the tube, and I didn't realise what I was doing until I sort of pondered on it afterwards. And I did a mindset teamwork event up in London at a gym, and I was looking at the commando mindset, because that's what we know. And you have the values, the ethos, the spirit. I mean, it's quite heavy, I think, to try and tell people about, because we just know it. That's what we indoctrinated with it in training, and that's what we've done in our careers. So I sort of just like made another slide and put, I can't, I can, I will. And I didn't really think too much of it, but it worked out really well because it was really relatable to pretty much anything that I was trying to say. And that's where it's come from, because, I put, like, when it comes to mindset, never mind mental ill health, but mental health, I think, needs to be, as a holistic view, needs to be underpinned by a mindset. But that mindset, people that are successful don't ever live in will, ever. They will go back into can't. It's a fight, but the process to get to will is a known. It's a pathway they tread because they've practiced it and they failed and they understand and they learn and they move forward. And if you're lying in bed in the morning and you wait, and even this morning I was like, I can't be bothered to walk the dog. I just want another 20 minutes in bed. I can't. And then, but it's knowing that you've said that, being present in the moment to go, come on, you can do it. Come on, get out of bed. And it's having that argument to go swing your legs out of bed, like a cornflakes advert, and you're getting up, dragging your knuckles on the floor, but you're doing it. Or it's, I can't be bothered to cook. Should we get a takeaway? When really, you know that you can't really afford it, and it's not really, you eat your takeaway and you instantly regret it after time, because you're like, why did we just spend 35 quid on that? But you go, come on, yeah, let's cook something. We can do it. and then you will do it. And it's even at the micro level, let alone I'm going to run 25 marathons in 25 days like some people would do, or I'm going to row across the Atlantic, or I'm going to do whatever. That is on the macro level, but it's still the same principle. Still, I can't do that. Come on, you can do it, and I will do it. It's the mindset for me that underpins the mental health sphere, which I've seen benefit in mental ill health, where people to become more present in themselves, to fight against the ill health, but also improve themselves as well when it's not ill health and it's fitness, when you're improving your mental fitness. So yeah, it's kind of stumbled across it, but it really works well, and it reflects me and my story as well. Like that's what I was saying to you, the little person on my shoulder that says you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it, and you've got to create that person that says you can do it and you're gonna do it. You know, you've got the other person that argues doesn't necessarily come naturally. You've got to create that person, you know. So
well, I think what you've created over the last 10 years of being an ERI and discovering mental health and what you're doing with certain individuals is a credit to you. And, putting this podcast out, Cant, Can, Will. When you releasing that?
For about 3 weeks' time.
Okay. So we're going to release the podcast round about then to explain to people a little bit about what the podcast is and the story behind it as well. So we can tie that in nicely with it, which will be amazing. But hopefully if people are listening to this and they find some commonality with it, I'll direct them to you and they can get in touch with you on Instagram. You got a Cant Can Will Instagram account on there too. So just get in touch with Mo if you want to find a little bit more direction with mental health. Otherwise, I'll put on the podcast bio a few links on where people can go if they need any help with that. Got anything else going on at the moment?
I don't need anything else going on at the moment. I'm toppers. So even if I had space, I need to keep that space. So there's nothing going on. I haven't got the room for it, unfortunately. So I've got plenty on. So no is the answer.
Mo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on the podcast, and thank you for joining me.
No, cheers, thank you.
And that's it. You can hear more on mental health issues and how to deal with them on Ryan's podcast, Cant, Can, Will, which you can find on most podcast platforms. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share and subscribe on your podcast provider, and also follow the Grumpy Surfer on Instagram. Thanks for listening.